This week, a beloved social justice activist stabbed to death at a bus stop.
I usually feel safe around here, but I'll have my head on a swivel from now on.
Plus, calls for change after a deadly attack at a Bronx bodega.
It's alarming. It feels dangerous.
And the DEA says the dangers of fentanyl are closer than you think. Right now, Fox 5's Crime in the City. Here are the crimes across the 5 boroughs. We begin this week in downtown Brooklyn, where the man who opened fire on a crowded subway last year learns his fate.
He didn't just hurt the people on the train, he hurt the people in this great city.
Victims of the mass shooting on a Brooklyn subway train last April left court Thursday, knowing the man who tried to murder them that morning, 64-year-old Frank James, would spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Are you satisfied with the sentence?
Yes.
This victim looked James in the face, reminding the shooter in court James had greeted him and the other unsuspecting passengers that morning, warning them there was water in the seats near him and encouraging them to sit at the other end of the train. That way, they would be easier to shoot. He ended up firing off 32 bullets after dropping a smoke grenade that caused mass panic.
Schools were on lockdown. Parents rushed to pick up their kids to make sure they were safe. People feared taking the subway.
James' attorneys argued their client should only get 18 years behind bars due to his poor mental health and the fact that he didn't kill anybody. James read his own statement to the judge, claiming that society and New York City was partly at fault because he did not receive the mental health treatment he so desperately needed.
I forgave him because he just needs the help.
Mental health does not give you a license to do a terroristic act as he did.
James was charged with 10 counts of terrorism on public transportation. Judge William F. Kuntz II sentenced him to 10 concurrent life sentences for each one of the victims, who received not only physical injury, but crippling mental injury, anxiety, PTSD, and panic attacks that stays with them to this day.
Today, Frank James was justly held accountable.
Over in Bed-Stuy, community members react to the brutal killing of a local activist.
A photo of 32-year-old Ryan Carson sits amid candles in Von King Park, where a vigil was held in his memory Monday night. The social justice and human rights activist had made his home in Brooklyn for more than a decade. He was waiting at a bus stop with his girlfriend about 4 a.m. Monday. The NYPD says this suspect came up to him, demanding to know what he was looking at, then fatally stabbed him multiple times in the chest. This grandfather, who's lived here for 50 years, tells us,
I usually feel safe around here, but I'll have my head on a swivel from now on.
About a mile away, outside his apartment in Bed-Stuy, we spoke with his roommate, who is devastated by his loss and asked us not to show his face.
He was committed to his direct personal relationships, the community he was in, and the city and world at large. He was... I have never met another person like him.
New York State Assembly member Emily Gallagher, who'd worked with him on various issues, posted a tribute on X. For more than a decade, Ryan Carson had been a staff member at NYPIRG. Executive Director Blair Horner says in a statement, Ryan was a consummate team player who would happily undertake the basic blocking and tackling tasks necessary to advance and win on an issue, but also shined in the spotlight as a leader, campaign manager, and spokesperson. Most recently, Carson had been fighting for overdose prevention centers to save lives, says his roommate.
I'm upset, I'm grieving, but I do keep thinking about how many other people in his personal life have been affected by this, and them, and also what a genuine loss this is for the city of New York.
Next, we visit the Bronx for a look at just how close to home the fentanyl crisis really is.
Some people think the deadly danger of illegal drugs is far away from their lives and their homes. But in reality, the DEA says it's everywhere and closer than you think. A baby's tragic death is heightening that awareness, and now bold new prevention efforts are underway to save lives. The fentanyl overdose death of 1-year-old Nicholas Dominici, being held here by his loving mother, Zoila Dominici, and the poisoning of 3 other small children at a Bronx daycare center stunned everyone. Federal prosecutors say it also housed a drug operation where fentanyl was in close proximity to children. More of the deadly drug was stashed in secret hiding places. For baby Nicholas's father, who says they carefully chose the licensed daycare, it's a devastating grief.
It's a really hard moment. This is not supposed to happen. This broke my heart.
Frank Tarantino, the DEA's special agent in charge of the New York division, says this tragedy is an example of how pervasive the danger is. He says the chemicals used to make fentanyl are coming mostly from China and India and go to Mexico, where the cartels turn them into fentanyl. They use many methods to get it into American cities and towns.
We have evidence that reveals that the traffickers are utilizing social media to move their poison.
The special narcotics prosecutor says there is one fatal drug overdose in New York City every 3 hours. Statewide, it's even worse, with one overdose death every 90 minutes, says Dr. Chinazo Cunningham, commissioner of the Office of Addiction Services and Supports. Dr. Cunningham strongly believes everyone should have the overdose-reversing drug Narcan, which is a brand name of naloxone.
Because everybody can save a life, because the overdose deaths that we're seeing are preventable. And, what's better than saving somebody's life?
The reality is, the quicker we raise our awareness and get our antennas up and understand that there's so much risk out there, yet there's tools available to us, that's where we can start making a big difference.
Moving to Manhattan, the NYPD intensifying its crackdown on ghost guns after that shocking daycare bust.
3D printed ghost guns. They are untraceable, unregulated, and making their way into the most vulnerable locations.
A home daycare provider had children in a dangerous environment.
The son of a licensed daycare center owner in East Harlem, arrested, charged with producing the weapons inside the same apartment where children were cared for. A shocking case, but perhaps not surprising.
3D printed guns are among the easiest ways to obtain a gun. They can be made in your home. They can be made anonymously, and they are cheap.
There's been a dramatic rise recently. Ghost gun recoveries citywide were up 66% last year, from 263 in 2021 to 436. Last year, they accounted for 12.2% of all guns recovered in the 5 boroughs, up from 4.4% in 2021 and 2.7% in 2020.
You're building them in the basement of your house or in an apartment next to anyone in any neighborhood in any community throughout the city.
Queens District Attorney Melinda Katz created a crime strategies and intelligence unit specifically focusing on the weapons, and says you might be surprised by just who is building these guns, with 3D printers and parts often purchased easily from online sellers.
It's like a side gig.
A side hustle to make some extra cash, like the recent case of a 27-year-old Queens man with no criminal history accused of selling ghost guns to people in the city and Trinidad. An airline mechanic this spring busted with an arsenal of high-powered gun kits and silencer parts. Or a pharmacist in Bayside who pleaded guilty to possession of a weapon after facing gun trafficking charges.
People are building them, selling them, and they're being used in assaults and murders.
There are no serial numbers and no background checks.
And it hits home for Bronx Congressman Richie Torres.
I had a constituent, Angela Yimbo, who was shot near the school where she was a student in the South Bronx, and she was shot at the hands of a ghost gun.
In response, he introduced legislation in honor of that 16-year-old victim, expanding gun-free school zones and requiring serial numbers and background checks for ghost guns, a proposal with basically no chance of succeeding in a divided government, but also intended to highlight gaping holes in national policy.
The main victims of ghost gun violence are children, and that's my concern.
The U.S. Supreme Court upheld the Biden administration's strategy to regulate manufacturers. Critics, however, argue the next president could just overturn this effort and reference New York's strict attempts to outlaw ghost guns in this state, some of the difficulties there. And about the daycare gun incident, that suspect faces charges of illegal firearms possession, manufacturing of an assault weapon, and reckless endangerment.
Back in the Bronx, the growing push to make bodegas safer for the people behind the counters.
The video we're about to show you will show you just how dangerous the working conditions can be for bodega workers. And if more resources aren't put into making them safer, then it could be a lot more dangerous for them. And shootings like what happened Sunday evening could happen easier and more often. Standing behind the counter at Philomar's grocery just isn't easy after Sunday's deadly attack caught on camera. I tried to reserve myself by ducking behind the counter. The two guys came in after him. I heard the commotion, then 2 shots. This bodega worker was at work Sunday evening when 35-year-old Cleveland Smith came inside running for his life, being chased by 2 masked men. And within seconds, surveillance video shows the shooter hit him twice in the chest before he was pronounced dead at the hospital. This shopper could barely believe her eyes as we showed her the shooting that happened at the store she shops at weekly.
To see that, that's definitely scary. It's alarming. It feels dangerous, you know?
In reality, I'm scared. I'm working scared. Nothing could stop the shooters from entering the store on Sunday, and nothing could in case they return.
For years, we've been asking the city and the state for funding to create safe haven bodegas in hot spots throughout the city.
Fernando Mateo, the spokesperson for United Bodegas of America, believes if Felomar, a bodega riddled with crime, was a safe haven bodega, the worker could have denied access to the shooters, potentially saving Smith's life. For between $2,000 and $2,500, a store could install an automatic buzz-in system for customers, along with more lights, cameras, and a panic button.
We know it works if it's put to the test.
But Mateo is calling on the city and state to invest, since bodega owners can seldomly afford it, he says.
It's unfair for them. You know, it's a safety issue.
And finally in Queens, do you recognize this man? Wanted for punching a woman on the subway?
Police need your help. They're searching for a man accused of punching a woman on the subway. This happened in Queens last Wednesday. Cops say the man punched a 24-year-old woman in the face at the 90 Street Elmhurst Avenue subway station. That victim suffered minor injuries, but if you recognize this person, the suspect on your screen, call Crime Stoppers. That number, 800-577-TIPS.
And that's this week's Crime in the City. Subscribe for more at youtube.com/Fox5NY.